Hello and welcome. Happy Tuesday, everybody. We'll wait for the wife to give the thumbs up that things look good. While we're getting settled here, and I start off with a bit of information about the stream. So each week we pick a new national park to explore together. This week we're exploring Theodore Roosevelt National Park. Hey, Fractals. For those of you with a copy of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, I've uploaded the flight plan today for you to follow along. So if you'd like to do that, that's awesome. Okay, getting the thumbs up from the wife. Always good. Everyone say hi, wife. Hi, wife. Okay, can throw that in the chat. Um, okay, thanks, Fractals. Yep. So that's the flight plan if you have Microsoft Flight Simulator. For those of you who don't, I also have a piece of software that will allow me to share that location with you on the internet, so you can kind of see where we are in the country if that's interesting too. Fractals, maybe you can post up that in just a moment. Perfect. Look at that. Oh, that's the flight plan. A couple other bits of information. So I've researched the park in preparation and added any new information with sources to the National Park Wiki page. Why Wikipedia? Well, there's two main reasons. One, it makes sure that the facts are checked by others. The second reason is it gives back to a living body of knowledge that goes beyond our hour here together. So to that end, if you notice anything incorrect or that could be clarified, please feel free to fix and update the wiki pages. As the wiki community often says, be bold and make the updates. Also, as we get towards the end, we'll vote on the next national park that we want to explore together. So look out for that and other posts in the chat. Also, feel free to post questions or thoughts or ideas or a little like hello wife or any of those kinds of things. Love it, and I'll make sure I'm looking over at the chat throughout the time. A small disclaimer, yes, I am a pilot, but we'll be taking full advantage of this simulator, so please don't try this in real life. Especially how low I fly. Always makes me a little nervous. Anyway, without further ado, I'm Jules Altus, and I'll be your pilot for this evening. So sit back, relax, and let's explore Theodore Roosevelt National Park. And with that, let's see if I can get myself rolling here on the runway. Do a little takeoff. So we'll be taking off from kind of midwestern North Dakota. And as I'm rolling here, I'll stay for the takeoff for anyone who likes that part of these things. And then I'll flip over and show kind of where we are in the country. So I'm looking for a particular airspeed, and then at that airspeed I can lift the plane off the ground. And I start to retract my flaps so you can see them go up. Okay. So this is Watford City Municipal. It's the airport that we're taking off from. We'll be heading just about due south here, so let me get myself oriented in my show notes. We don't need to be that high off the ground. It's relatively flat throughout. So here, let me flip over here. Oh, thank you, Fractals. Yep, so that second link, the events flights tracker, is if you want to see kind of where we are, but just a quick flash it up. So this is base ourselves north. So that's where we are relative to the rest of the United States. And we'll be flying through actually quite a bit of North Dakota today. Starting in a little bit at the middle and then coming down through kind of the other side of the middle. Depends how you look at it. Flip that back. North Dakota is flat. Yeah, it's true. I was looking at the kind of height, and I found that if I stayed at about 2,800 feet or so, I could kind of coast over everything. So I'll kind of hit that same sort of altitude when we're flying around here. Got the sun right in my eye. See if we can change the time of day a little bit. Oof. Okay, well that's fine. Go a little bit more early morning. Hi there, Stacy. Okay. Fractals, you want to throw up that poll, and let's see how many people have been to this park before. This is a less popular park, but not unheard of. Be curious who's been there. It's along I-94 up in North Dakota, so it's actually a very easy park to stop by as you're driving through the state, if you're ever in that area. West side isn't as bad, yeah, not as much. Thanks, Fractal. So curious if you've been to the national park, and yes, in the last 10 years, before that, or never yet. So today we're flying a Cessna 172. This is a quintessential training airplane. It's a very fun plane to fly, high wing. I won't spend any more time on that, but people have questions. It's a very fun one. Interestingly, one of the couple of planes, kind of training planes that I haven't flown which, well, I guess I have technically a long, long time ago, but spent most of my time in low-wing planes. Those are my favorite. So, Theodore Roosevelt National Park. It's a national park comprising of 3 geologically separate areas in the Badlands of western North Dakota. The park honors U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt and is the only national park named directly after a single person. So it's meant to honor him and remember some of the important contributions he made, but it's also one of the only ones that is named after a person. Been there a couple times. Very nice park. Yep. Yeah, I should mention. So I have actually been to Theodore Roosevelt, and I did like it. I'm gonna flip out of the plane real quick and trim some of these things up. So I'm looking at the RPM, the rotations per minute on the engine. I'm trying to get that in the green, and then just making sure the plane is trimmed so I don't have to spend so much time flying it. Stop by, but not overnight. Yeah, stop by, but not overnight. Especially the North Unit, you'll see it's supposed to be really good for camping. So if you're looking for a camping trip, North Unit of Theodore Roosevelt. So the park covers about 70,000 acres of land across the 3 units. So it's the North Unit, the South Unit, and the Elkhorn Ranch Unit. And we'll fly past all 3 of those today. The park's larger South Unit lies along Interstate 94, like I mentioned, near Medora, North Dakota. If I got that pronunciation wrong, feel free to correct me in the chat. The smaller North Unit, our first stop, is situated about 80 miles north of the South Unit. And then Roosevelt's Elkhorn Ranch is located between the North and the South Units. The Little Missouri River flows through all 3 units. So those of you who were here last week, you'll remember we talked about rivers meandering. This is a great park to see that sort of geology or water formation. So we'll look at that a little bit from the sky. And the Madehay Trail, connects all 3 units. So it's a hiking trail that goes between all 3, and then a river that goes between all 3. All right, straw poll. Let's see. We have 2 in the last 10 years. Okay, cool. Yes, I've been there the last 10 years, actually. I was there overnight, and it was one of the rare nights where not necessarily rare, but unusual nights they had the Northern Lights. I just so happened to stop by on my way out to Seattle. So there you go. Yes, once upon a time for 1 vote, and then not yet 3 votes. It's a good park to go and check out. So, like I mentioned, there's a lot of good camping. There's a lot of good wildlife viewing and hiking, backcountry hiking. Excuse me. There's also both main units of the park, the North and South Unit, have good scenic drives. So if you're looking to not get out of your car and just kind of soak in the views, maybe a couple of overlooks, it's a good park for that. And we'll drive along those scenic roads a little bit so you can kind of see what it looks like. No, we were backpacking the North Unit last summer. Rosno, was it good? Everyone is saying that everyone is saying the national park forums at least are highly complimentary of the north part of the park here, and I can see if I can show a little bit. As we come up over this ridge, notice how the land goes from this sort of like a little bit of formation to suddenly it drops off and it becomes this quintessential Badlands, that sort of like carved out floodplain there. No, not too bad, but the Badlands still gave an elevation change. Yeah, still give a little bit of elevation. They do, yeah. It drops down about 500, 600 feet or so. All right, so this park actually has some pretty cool YouTube things going on, some good videos that they've hosted up. They also have something I hadn't seen before called an education ranger, and they host a couple of those. So let me pull up real quick and do it. This is the 50-second intro to the park.
Hello and welcome to the Chimney Butte Ranch House, where we use the Maltese Cross brand. I lived here in the 1880s. You'll not only see me here at the park, but I hope you'll see me when you see the bison, when you look at the blue sky, when you see the cottonwood trees rustling in the wind. I hope you'll see me there. Come see my ranch house and see the beautiful Badlands of North Dakota. See the wildlife. Bring your children and grandchildren. Enjoy the strenuous life. Have a wonderful time in our national parks. Bully. Oh, I'm Theodore Roosevelt, and I approve this message.
Excellent. All right, we'll flip back to the live stream here, right as we cross over into the north unit of the park. So let me change my perspective here just a little bit. So this is the Little Missouri River, and the visitor center for the north unit is right down there, kind of off our right wing. So I'm going to drop into the Badlands a little bit. You can see some of that height differential that Rosno was mentioning. Let me know that sync rate should be gone for sound at least, but let me know if you can still hear that. Volume is real low. Okay, good to know. Thank you, Fractals, on the video. Fractals is the moderator. Jay Nichols. Um, okay, so almost died in the Badlands once. Oh no, Fractals. I didn't know that actually. I feel like every week you surprise me with like, oh, my uncle lives in Alaska or something like that. All these fun facts I'm learning. Okay, so this is the floodplains for the Little Missouri River. This is the kind of quintessential Badlands. Now I'm gonna keep flying through here, but let me pull up a photo real quick of what we're looking at. And there's a couple of interesting things. So this is sort of like what this looks like in real life. That's sort of the structure with the river through the center. This is the most representative I could find. Yeah, it's fun to see the park from above. It's really pretty neat. The other one that I'll show is these called concrete or cannonball concretions. And if you go to visit the park, those are just off our right wing, right about now. So down in the hills back here are the cannonball concretions, as well as a bunch of really good hiking trails that go along the river. So kind of right off there is a pull-off spot if you're driving around off the scenic road, and then also good hiking trails. Now our first stop here is going to be the Riverbend Overlook, so we'll pause there when we get up. Are they doing any fracking in or near this park? Stacey earlier, so I actually looked at potentially doing oil for a topic for this stream. There are some other parks that have very interesting stories around oil, so I decided to hold on to it. But yeah, like Brechtel said, it's near but further east for the most part. There's some open discussion though, because some of the national parks have uh, apparently the mineral rights in the national parks are not necessarily protected, and so some of the parks have made it illegal to do things like drill on the park grounds or to anyway infringe on those mineral rights. Other parks have not. My memory of it is that Theodore Roosevelt doesn't have such protections in place yet. Yosemite, for instance, does have those protections. So there's like 42 parks that are still lacking the kind of mineral protections that would prevent that sort of thing. So not something we'll talk about much more in detail here, but yeah, really interesting topic. Drive past a lot of oil extraction driving between the two units. Yeah, I believe that. All right, so outdoor look here. This is the Riverbend Overlook. And I'm going to actually pause here for just a moment. See if we can get an okay view here. So there's that Riverbend Overlook. And you can kind of see there's a bit of a pull out, like right out here. And in a little bit, once we leave the park, we have like an 80-mile drive to the southern unit, or 80-mile flight, excuse me, to the southern unit. So a bit of time. I'll play a second video that's a little bit of an overview of the park, a little more detail, and it highlights that view right behind us right there. So just remember that one. All right, let's keep going. Jeff has a lot of oil. So next place we're going to go is the Oxbow. And for those of you who joined last week, you may remember Oxbow is a artifact of rivers meandering. So as a river meanders over time, an oxbow, excuse me, can form, and then that'll get cut off from the rest of the river. So we'll see that in just a second. Oops, the iPad big. I want to show this real quick. This is kind of a small image, but it's the sedimentary layers that you're seeing in the park. So it doesn't show up great in the game. I wanted to make sure that we highlighted a little bit. And then last but not least, that's that same view that I was just talking about. So, all right, let's poke our head out the left window here a little more interesting. But you can kind of see actually on the right, it's sort of like relatively flat, sort of plateau, and then all of a sudden it just drops off. And that's an artifact of the river carving out a lot of this area over time. Let's make our way over to Oxbow Overlook, which is the end of the scenic drive. So like I mentioned, we'll do a little bit more intro to the park, but person of the week this week is Theodore Roosevelt, which totally makes sense. So Teddy Roosevelt, or TR, you may recognize this photo of him, or my other new favorite photo, which is this one of him from when he was a cowboy in the area. So that's quite the look, and he really wears it well. Out of curiosity, what is the people in the chat? What do you think about when you hear Teddy Roosevelt? Like, what kind of comes to mind as a memory of him? For me, it was kind of hunting and riding horses were the two things that really stuck out. Speak softly and carry a big stick. Yeah, that's a good one. Now you can add cowboy to the list. All right, so this is the Riverbend overlook. So we're kind of looking back along that valley. This is again the north unit of the park, and that would be soon to be an Oxbow Lake. Sorry, Oxbow Overlook is this part of it. All right. So this is our last view before we leave the northern unit. Like I said, great hiking, great drive, great vistas if you want to go and visit. And now we're going to follow the Little Missouri River down to the Elkhorn Ranch unit. Tough Rider, Teddy Bear. Teddy Bear, that's a good one. Yep. Yep. All pretty key ones. So I wanted to start off with Teddy Roosevelt with a story, which I found on the national park web pages. They'll have stories for the different parks on occasion. And so, though it may seem like a typical tall tale of the West, Teddy Roosevelt once found himself in a bar fight in Montana. Roosevelt never specified the exact date, but he, excuse me, let me make sure my plane's trimmed real quick before I jump into a story. Okay, yeah. So we'll keep our. So I lose the river. Okay. So he never specified the exact date, but it likely happened in the summer of 1884. So that year, Roosevelt was still relatively unknown to the area and was grieving the loss of his wife and mother earlier in the year. Roosevelt had been riding for his own enjoyment through the Badlands and prairies of western North Dakota, eastern Montana territory for many days when he arrived at Nolan's Hotel in McGinnisville. There he encountered a bully who, like others who had not known Roosevelt very well, teased him about his glasses. Roosevelt described the incident in his autobiography. It was late in the evening when I reached the place. I heard one or two shots in the bar room as I came up and disliked going in. But as there was nowhere else to go and it was a cold night, Inside the room were several men who, including the bartender, were wearing that kind of smile worn by men who are making to believe they like what they don't like. A shabby individual in a broad hat with a cocked gun in each hand was walking up and down the floor, with strident profanity. He had evidently been taking shots at the clock, which had 3 or 4 holes in the face. As soon as he saw me, he hailed me as Four Eyes in reference to my spectacles, and said, "Four Eyes is going to treat." I joined in the laugh and got behind the stove to sit down, thinking to avoid being noticed. He followed me, however, and though I tried to pass it off as jest, this merely made him more offensive. And he stood, leaning over me, a gun in each hand, using very foul language. In response, he reiterated his command that I should go and set up drinks. I said, "Well, if I've got to, I've got to," and rose, looking past him. As I rose, I struck quick and hard with my right hand as I straightened out, hitting with my left, and then again with my right. He fired his guns, I don't know if out of convulsion or if trying to attack me. But as he fell, he struck his head on the corner of the bar. If he had moved, I was about to drop to my knees, but he was senseless. I took away his guns, and the other people in the room, who were now loud in denunciation of him, hustled him out and put him in the shed. The next morning, the bully had left town on a freight train. Now, before coming to Dakota, Roosevelt was a successful boxer at Harvard. He also maintained an interest in martial arts throughout his life, including judo, kendo, jiu-jitsu, boxing, wrestling, and he practiced a lot of them at the White House. So, a little bar fight of an ex-president. Let's pop out real quick and look at this meandering river. So I highlighted an oxbow example, but you can really see this floodplain and then how the river just has sculpted out, especially with the sedimentary rock going on here. Its own little path. So there's your sailor guy. There's your Rough Rider. That's where he gets his reputation from. So okay. Other things about. Let me actually pull up this video. So I mentioned that I have another one that I really enjoy. It's sort of an overview of the park as a whole, and then the national park system and what they represent and protect. So I like this as an example for both of those things. It's Fractals. You been in a bar fight, Fractals? I seem like a saint. Oh, I thought you meant that was the qualification. Got it. If you got a bar fight story, you'll have to tell me about that later.
Hello from Theodore Roosevelt National Park. My name is Ranger Jenna, and I'm an education ranger for the National Park Service. My job is to teach people about the national parks. Right now, I'm standing in the North Unit at Riverbend Overlook, one of my favorite views in the park. From this view, we can see a piece of every resource that is important to Theodore Roosevelt National Park, like the Little Missouri River, the Badlands landscape, and if you look really closely, you might be able to see a little bit of wildlife. These are just a few examples of the notable features we have here. But what do I mean by resources? Well, if you've ever been to a national park before, you've probably seen this symbol. Park rangers refer to it as the arrowhead, and every piece of the arrowhead represents the different natural and historical resources that we work hard to protect at every national park and monument. Let's take a closer look. In the foreground of this symbol is a bison. We do have bison at Theodore Roosevelt National Park. However, we don't only protect the bison. This bison is a symbol for all of the animals and wildlife in the park, like the prairie dogs, pronghorn, and bighorn sheep. Just behind the bison is a sequoia tree. This sequoia tree represents every plant. We do not have sequoia trees at Theodore Roosevelt National Park, but we do have other really important plants, which we protect, like grasses, wildflowers, and cottonwood trees. Behind the trees is a big mountain, which represents all landscapes and terrain in the national parks. Theodore Roosevelt National Park is located in the Badlands, which is a very unique land resource that can change very quickly. The Badlands are made up of layers of sediment that have been cut into by water and glaciers to form hilly features called buttes that are typically topped with prairies. In front of the mountain and a few pine trees is this little tiny symbol of a lake, which represents all bodies of water and air. The national parks want to keep all water and air clean so that all the animals and people have fresh water and air to enjoy. At Theodore Roosevelt National Park, we protect the Little Missouri River, which runs through the whole park. Finally, encompassing all of the other symbols, we have the arrowhead. The entire shape of the National Park Service emblem is an arrowhead, which represents all the human and cultural history preserved within the natural lands. Theodore Roosevelt National Park holds a very important historical record from Native American land and resource usage to the history of early ranchers, and even Theodore Roosevelt's personal history, including the reason the national lands exist. Theodore Roosevelt National Park was established in 1978 by President Harry Truman and is the only national park to be named for a person, which is a great way to thank Roosevelt for his idea to protect the public lands. While Roosevelt was living in North Dakota, he saw that the animals were being overhunted and the land was starting to look overused, and felt that these resources were important to protect. While he was president, Roosevelt advocated for conservation and established over 230 million acres of protected lands across the United States. Because of this, we now have national parks and national forests. While you are visiting Theodore Roosevelt National Park, I encourage you to look for these resources and appreciate their importance to our park. To safely explore the park, make sure you plan ahead. Know where you're going, how long you'll be there, and what you need to bring with you. And most importantly, let someone else know your plan. Always remember to wear closed-toed shoes, pack a lot of water, and wear sun protection since there is not very much shade at the park. If you plan to eat lunch at the park, remember to pack foods that can be cleaned up easily and don't drop too many crumbs. It's very important to leave no trace to protect the wildlife in the park from eating foods that are unnatural to their environment. It is always important to remember to be respectful of nature, each other, including other park visitors, and yourself. The national parks are public lands, which means they belong to every one of us. So please do your part and protect our public lands. Thank you for joining me in learning about taking care of our public lands and resources. Now it's time to get ready to explore and enjoy your visit. We'll see you soon at Theodore Roosevelt National Park.
Thank you, Ranger Jana. Wife does a little clap. Um, so that I liked that because it touched on a lot of the parts of the park, so that kind of gives some really good imagery of what the park looks like and why it's important. But I also had not known the story of the arrowhead, and as I've been writing the show notes for these, all the parks kind of gravitate around that sort of like animal, water, culture, those sorts of things. Became a really useful way of thinking about why we protect these parks and the kinds of things to go and look for when you go to your next park. Keep those sorts of things in mind, and you can reference it's on all the uniforms. Crazy Tycho, I have not seen his diary entry from the day his mother and wife died, but I believe it is heartbreaking. It sounds like he really went through a lot all at once. He says the light of my life has gone out of my the light has gone out of my life. I've heard that quote before. I didn't know that was from his diary. Well, one of the most famous of all units fighting in Cuba, the Rough Riders, the Nanguan, and the First U.S. Volunteer Cavalry under the leadership of Theodore Roosevelt. Cool. That seems like a fascinating history. Speaking of Theodore Roosevelt, we're coming up in the Elkhorn Ranch unit. In the game and in real life, it's there's not much to it anymore. It's protected because it's an important place to Roosevelt. This is where he had his ranch, but there's not a lot to see per se. Is it worth checking out? I think so. I mean, it seems like it would be a really cool spot along the river. So we'll point it out as we pass by. Okay. So I won't spend too much more time on Roosevelt. He's got a fascinating past and a lot more to him, as we've already seen in the chat. A couple of examples of that sort of stuff. One of the things that I wanted to tie his presidential election to another president that we talked about a little while ago. When he was elected into his full term in 1904, he continued promoting progressive policies, and then he successfully groomed his close friend William Howard Taft to succeed him in 1908. So he was elected in 1904, and he groomed his friend in 1908 to take over after him. That worked, but when Taft got into office, Roosevelt didn't like his brand of conservatism, and so he blatantly tried to win the Republican nomination in 1912. He failed, walked out, and then created the Bull Moose Party. So you may remember the Bull Moose Party, founded by Theodore Roosevelt. That then split the vote, and so Howard Taft didn't win, and Theodore Roosevelt didn't win, and instead, Woodrow Wilson won. After Woodrow Wilson came Warren Harding. So Harding Icefield from Kenai Fjords is 3 presidents down the line from Roosevelt. And if you think of Roosevelt and Taft as sort of having similar goals and similar ideals, then kind of related things. So this is the Elkhorn Ranch unit. Like I said, so that's where his ranch was, and this is where he would have spent a lot of time. Not there's a road that you can go and visit it, and it's supposed to be a very pretty thing to see, but there's not much more to it in the game beyond just a cool location for a ranch. All right, on our way to the South unit. So let's talk about one of the key animals. We'll talk about 2 animals today. One of the key animals in the park is the bison. Fractals, you want to throw up that poll about bison? So quick note, the term buffalo is sometimes considered to be a misnomer for a bison. And that's sort of true since it's only distantly related to like a true buffalo, which is the Asian water buffalo or the African buffalo. So though bison may be considered more scientifically correct, buffalo is also considered correct as a result of the standard usage in American English, and it's listed in many dictionaries as an acceptable alternative. So technically buffalo has a longer history in the United States than bison, so it's sort of like when someone corrects you and says, well, they're really bison, not buffalo, it's like they're correct, but you're also correct, so, hold your ground. Don't punch them in the face, probably, but you can hold your ground. Specifically, Theodore Roosevelt has plains bison, not wood bison. There's 2 types of American bison. This is a plains bison. All right, Fractals threw up that poll. So what do we think? How do you know a bison is going to attack you? First, it's hard to tell, or they're kind of unpredictable. Or do they yell obscenities at you first? Or bison, like a ninja, cannot be detected until it's too late. So go ahead and vote on which of those three you think it is. While people are voting on that one, so I mentioned that there's two kinds of American bison: plains bison, wood bison. There's a natural population of plains bison in Yellowstone National Park. I thought about doing bison for that one as well as Wind Cave National Park, but there's enough interesting things in both of those. Thought this was a good location for it. Plus, they have some cool videos we'll show. Uh, at one time, at least 25 million American bison were spread across the United States and Canada. 25 million. However, by the late 1880s, the total number of bison had been reduced to less than 30 in the area that was later called Yellowstone National Park. So from 25 million to about 30 free roaming bison. There was some that people had protected on ranches because they were worried that they were going to get removed, which they kind of did. If you've never seen what a bison looks like under the hood, that's their kind of bone structure. So you'll see images of these. They have this kind of really big spined kind of back to them, all covered in fur. So that's what's actually going on underneath. What did the buffalo say when it left for work? Bye, son. Funny. We fancy bison the plains. I didn't fancy bison the plains. They're just fine. I can't believe that's so funny. Um, it's funny, Crazy Tycho and HW, because I also stumbled across a surprising number of bison jokes when I was researching this. So I left a bunch for Fractals in case you wanted to throw out some jokes. And you guys have, you both have uh, two excellent ones. I have not heard the fancy bison. The plain ones are just fine. That's cute. Um, okay, so bison are nomadic grazers and travel in herds. The bulls leave the herds of females at about 2 or 3 years of age and join a herd of males, which are generally smaller than the female herds. Mature bulls rarely travel alone. Towards the end of the summer, for the reproductive season, the sexes necessarily commingle. So males separate from the females, and later they get back together. They're known for living in the Great Plains, but they formerly had a much larger range, including much of eastern United States, parts of Mexico. But the species was hunted near extinction, and so we got this reduced range. Actually, I have a range photo a little further along. Let me show you this. So this is actually about what their range was. So you can see like the kind of tan light colored is where they originally lived, and then I believe this is 1870 is the darker, and then the really dark tiny spots in here is at 1889. So really reduced range. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is in a minute. Straw poll results, hard to tell. They're unpredictable for one vote. Yell obscenities at you for 5 votes and unpredictable. One on obscenities. So good guess. And then it cannot be detected until it's too late. They are fortunately and unfortunately very easy to detect. Yeah, it is a large range. The first one though, I like this poll in particular because it's good to know that bison appear calm and docile often, but they can suddenly switch over into kind of an attack mode. So you need to be careful if you're dealing with bison. You don't want to accidentally find yourself getting attacked by one, and it may not seem like they're in a bad mood, and suddenly they could be going after you, running at 35 miles per hour. Turns out. Okay, so bison. They tend to graze, feeding on lower vegetation, and they don't do as much browsing, which is like going up in the trees. Typically, they stay on the ground. A little bit of difference between the American and the European bison. I have a bunch of notes in here, but even as I'm reading them, it's not as interesting. It's sort of like the European bison have horns that face forward. They typically browse. They go for the trees. They don't go down for below. They typically use their horns more when they fight, whereas bison use their heads and sort of headbutt each other. I'll quickly summarize like 6 paragraphs of stuff. That's okay. American bison are more easily tamed than their European cousins, and they breed with domestic cattle more easily. So you might have heard like a beefalo. It's because it's easy to breed a bison with other cattle. All right, I'm going to flip out here real quick, and let's change our sun angle slightly. So we're coming up on the southern unit of the park. Now you can see the Missouri River's off to our right here, and then we have these sort of badland structures is more all around. And a classic thing that you'll see if and when you go and visit is these sort of red tops on there. people are interested, we can talk a little bit more about those. But that's something to look for as you pass by, is those red tops on the top of these hills. Oops, bison party tonight is going to be Ugly. Crazy Tycho, excellent. When did the bison become popular in the United States? 1969 was the bicentennial. Fractal's a good one too. If you walk away with an incredible number of bison joke, I will be very, very happy. Okay, so let me get ourselves over to our first stop here, which is the Wind Canyon Trail. This is sort of the one, if you're driving on I-94 and you don't have enough time, or you have enough time to go see something, but not much more. There's the painted Canyon Trail, I believe, is a really easy one. It's right off the highway, but this one is kind of in the park a bit more. It's a good stop. It's the Wind Canyon Trail. So bison do a behavior called wallowing. Wallowing is kind of like when pigs roll in mud or other animals kind of rolling in the dirt. In particular, bison wallow then is a shallow depression in the soil, and bison will go and roll themselves in it, covering themselves in mud or dust. Likely they do this for a couple of reasons. It's a grooming behavior associated with molting, so if they're getting rid of some of the extra hair. Let me pause here. They also, for male-to-male interaction, social behavior of group cohesion, play behavior, relief from skin irritation from biting insects, a couple other things, thermoregulation. So they'll do that wallowing, and I'll pull up a little thing of what that looks like. If you remember what this looks like for a little bit later, because we'll watch a little video of bison, you can see a bunch of them wallowing off in the distance. You've probably seen like the classic pigs doing this sort of thing. So they do that same sort of behavior. Just a massive animal. They're the largest terrestrial animal in North America and Europe. I'm doing that from memory because I think I skipped over that in the show notes, but it is the largest. I checked that out before. So this is the look from Wind Canyon Trail. So you get the Little Missouri off to your right and left. And then the Wind Canyon is that canyon over there, and you can see sort of off in the corner, there's your pullout where you go, and the trail that leads you up to the edge here. So this is a pretty place, and they highly recommend it for sunset. Let's do a little sunset peek. So, a little bit of sun glare. Yeah, it's prettier in real life. They have some incredible photos and some incredible Northern Lights photos. Honestly, the park has a lot of really cool stuff to work with in their materials. It's pretty fun to go through. All right, so we'll keep flying along here. So we're going to go kind of follow some of the South Unit trails, and then we'll pop over to the edge of I-94 to look at what that overlook looks like. Oops. Get myself flying again. Okay. Heard that any other bison jokes lately? not recently. Also, wild horses in this area. Yeah, and Rosno, this is a good mention. So there are feral wild horses in the area, and they're protected in the park. It sounds like because they're pretty unique, and so they just said that we'll keep them around here. So yeah, so you can go and see. Did you see the horses when you were there, Rosno? I feel like they were in the South Unit, if I remember correctly. So sure, this is one of the hiking trails. You can go hike along the Badlands right through this little canyon here. Okay, so wallowing. Bison, when they attack, like I mentioned, they're unpredictable. So usually they can appear lazy, unconcerned, but they'll attack anything without warning and with no apparent reason. They can move at speeds of up to 35 miles per hour and cover great distances in a bound. So that is a running bison, which I've not seen in real life, but if it was coming at you, seems like it would be a lot to deal with. They weigh between 2,000 and 2,700 pounds, and moving at 30 miles per hour, that is how they would injure you. Most likely is just ramming into you. They can also use their hind legs to kill or maim pretty effectively. So, in the words of early naturalists, they were dangerous, savage animals that feared no other animal and in prime condition could best any foe except wolves and brown bears. So they're king of the plains. The mating season lasts between June and September, peak is about July to August. At that time, the bulls rejoin the herd with the females, and they're also more likely to be aggressive. So if you're there in July and August, which peak summer in the Badlands is a warm time to visit, but if you are to do that, be careful because they are extra aggressive around the females. Yeah, we saw them in the few places in the South Unit. The Wind Canyon hike was one spot. Oh, you saw the feral horses, the wild horses on the Wind Canyon hike. That's pretty cool, actually. I'm curious about Stacy's question about size. if you remember. So the bison live in river valleys. They typically open grasslands, but they can also be more arid lands, and wooded areas technically can host them. You saw the range is pretty wide. Not particularly high altitude animal, although some of them do exist and they'll stay up at high altitudes. Um, so one notable thing about bison is the human impact on them. So we talked about how there was an incredible number of them previously. The Native Americans really respected and revered the bison, and they used it as their principal source of food, but also as a principal source for a lot of their materials and other things that they needed to make. So they protected in a very respectful way to ensure ongoing longevity and abundance. And what happened is when European settlers came in, they thought it was a great animal to go and hunt. And so beginning at the start of the 18th century, there was about 50 million bison were slaughtered during the 19th century. And then there's other reasons why they were kind of declining at that time too. So one of the things that stood out to me was railroads apparently used to advertise hunting by rail, where the trains would encounter a herd alongside while they were going, and the men aboard would just fire out into the bison herds from the train's roof or from the windows, and then just leave countless dead animals to rot. And so this video was shown, Ranger Jenna showed us the same picture, but that is a pile of skulls. So each one of those is a bison skull. All right, let me pause back over here and flip around so we can see the park a bit better. So there's I-94. If you look, oops, behind us, that's the Painted Canyon Visitor. I'm sorry, I skipped it a little bit. So the Painted Canyon Visitor Center out on that look. Tell you what, we'll do this. Can't do that in a real plane, but it's okay. So this is the Painted Canyon Visitor Center down here, kind of right off the highway. So if you go and visit, and then this is sort of the view that you get. It's obviously prettier in real life, but kind of cool to see. Oh, I forgot to show all of these, which I'll briefly do while we're here. Emrausen maybe a little smaller than domestic horses, but they were still fairly large. So like a proper horse, Emrausen. That was my impression. The park also has pictures of the horses fighting, which I hadn't seen a horse fight before, but sort of like getting the hooves up into the face. And yeah, I can post those in the Discord afterward, actually, if people are curious. It's kind of a cool thing. So that was the Wind Canyon Overlook, that place where I paused just a minute ago. And Emrausen said that they went and saw for horses there. So this is that sunset. So I attempted to replicate it, but it's just not as good as the real thing. And then last but not least, the park, like a lot of the national parks, is really good night skies. So I wanted to pull this one up. This is that same Wind Canyon Overlook, and then you have the Milky Way and the stars. Right, so I found a video of bison and actually how you collect DNA from a bison. For the sake of time, I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm just going to flip back here. So we're still looking over at Painted Canyon. We're pretty close to the end of our park. I use a little faster plane today. So let me pull this up though really quick, and I will show you and just the first part of this so that we can see kind of bison moving around and just interacting with each other. That's really the key thing. How they collect DNA is also interesting, but I'll fast forward through a little bit of this. Okay. Let's go to like here. Also, the music is
Darting the animal in the field is a less invasive way of collecting tissue samples than having a roundup, for example, and bringing them all in through the chute. Biopsy darts consist of a sharpened metal cylinder with a barbed needle in the end, which punches out a little section of the tissue
and just pull a little bit of the skin.
We try to take a representative sample of the entire herd, so we select bison, both male and female, and across all age ranges. The dart guns are powered by CO2 cartridges, so pressure. And because of that...
There you go, so there's a wallowing going on. I'm gonna hit him with the dart. This is a kind of cool video. I don't know what parts of the music you heard, but for some reason, all of the Teddy Roosevelt National Park videos have these odd but amazing soundtrack choices. Like I think that video, I can't remember which for the next topic. I got another video. I don't want to ruin the music choice. All right, let me keep flying around here. We can't hear you over the video. Okay, good to know. Most dairy cows in the U.S. are direct descendants of two specific bulls. Text at the start of the video reminding me of that. Oh. Fractals, I didn't know that. Most dairy cows in the U.S. are direct descendants of two specific bulls. Wow. Can't hear you over the video. Fippy, good to know. Thank you very much. Is the video too loud too? Let me know. I turned up the YouTube volume, so hopefully it's a little bit better. But all right, so I'm gonna fly around the park just a little bit here because we have a moment and it's very pretty scenery. And while we do that, let me pull up. This is the Painted Canyon. That was the spot that we were just paused at. It's kind of our last viewing stop in the plan. All right, so bison. In summary, American bison are the largest terrestrial animals in North America. You may hear them called buffalo, and while that is incorrect, it's been used long enough, it's considered okay. Bison are unpredictable and fast. They are also hunted near extinction. I forgot to write a joke for this one, but it was going to be something about wallowing in I don't know what. That's how far I got. So anyway, that's fine. Fractals, quick save me. Roll the next poll on our next animal today, which is prairie dogs. So one of the other big animals in the park is the prairie dog. So you may have seen these before. Little prairie dog guy. They're herbivores and burrowing rodents native to the grasslands of North America. There's about 5 species. The black-tailed one is the one in this park. Black-tailed prairie dog. They are a type of ground squirrel from North America. Let me see. So prairie dogs are named for their habitat and their warning call, which sound similar to a dog's bark. So prairie because prairie, and dog because it sounds a little bit like dog's bark. I have a little video later. We can look at that. The name was used as early as 1774 and in the 1804 journals of the Lewis and Clark expedition. So last week, for those of you who were there for Gateway Arch, this is the Lewis and Clark expedition. They noted that they discovered a village of an animal the French call the prairie dog. Food, they're primarily herbivores. They'll eat some insects. They build these elaborate burrows, and the burrows are designed for protection from the elements, things like floods, blizzards, hailstorms, drought. In particular, they help them control their body temperature. They'll keep it warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer. And then the tunnel systems that they build are built to prevent rainwater from flooding the whole thing, and also to prevent runoff and erosion. The prairie dog burrows are about 16 to 33 feet long, so pretty long, and about 6 to 10 feet below the ground. The holes to the entrance are about 4 to 12 inches in diameter. And those burrows can have up to 6 entrances. So let me pull up this real quick. This is a little one of it burrowing, just so you get a sense of the scale. So the prairie dog's about, or that entrance is about 4 to 12 inches wide. The prairie dog's going to work out. Let's see, picking up the sand. Or that dirt, excuse me. Alright, what is the common action seen among prairie dogs in a family? Talk about families of prairie dogs in a minute. So, is it some sort of kissing? Or is it a sort of fist bump? Or is it a sort of breakdancing? I'll give everyone a second to answer on that one. So these burrows are elaborate, can have 6 entrances. They also have this idea of a dome crater and a rim crater. And I tried to find a public domain or at least a usable image that I could show in the stream. And there's nothing really good, but you can imagine that the dome is a higher entrance to like a higher actual structure entrance to the burrow, and then the rim is lower and downwind of the dome. The reason that they do that is when you have the higher dome and a higher dome upwind, the lower rim downwind, it actually creates an airflow through the burrow system. So that sort of structure then creates essentially a way of keeping fresh air moving through it. A clever little design from the prairie dog. All right, so there's Badlands, there's Medora, off the little town off in the distance. So this is Badlands National Park. 10 minutes, and I probably have about 10 minutes to the airport. So I'm going to continue flying over the Badlands. A lot of the area is very pretty, so I'll start making my way to the airport. Go back to the inside view here. Straw poll results, some sort of kissing, 3 votes. Okay. Fist bump for 2 votes, and breakdancing for 1 vote. Good guesses across. There's a town in Wisconsin called Prairie du Chien, which means prairie dog. I was a move there. There you go. It could have been honestly named after the Lewis and Clark expedition. Something to look into afterwards. Fractals. Okay, so like I mentioned, that the structure of the holes creates this sort of ventilation system. They also have chambers in there, so they have like a chamber for nursing the young, and they have a chamber to protect food from flooding, and they have a chamber to can't remember the other ones offhand, but they have like kind of different reasons for different areas of the burrows. It's a pretty clever setup. They're also a highly social animal, so they live in large colonies or towns. So this is a prairie dog town. It doesn't look like much at the surface. If you got up close, you'd see those little holes and all popping up. But these towns can contain about 15 to 26 family groups. So a collection of prairie dog families span a couple hundreds of acres. Let me start again. The basic unit of a prairie dog's life is its family. The family then can live in a town, and the towns can span hundreds of acres. So each prairie dog town might contain 15 to 26 different family groups. If it's a big town, it may be divided into something called wards, which are separated by physical barriers. So you actually have family groups that exist within a town, and that town may be subdivided into wards. Speaking of highly social. The other piece of it that is interesting about prairie dogs, and the answer to this straw poll, is they do greet each other. I don't know if they greet each other, but they interact with family members by kissing. So, or this sort of like appears to be kissing. So this is kind of what that looks like, prairie dog. And they also groom each other is another way they kind of interact and say hello. Interestingly, they don't perform these behaviors with prairie dogs of other family groups. So it's only your family that you would kiss or groom. So there you go. Most prairie dog families are made of one adult breeding male, and then 2 to 3 adult females, maybe some offspring, that sort of thing. Let me grab this. Let me know if this is too loud. Was that the one with the like random heavy metal background, or was it like, I can't remember what the audio one was for that. Anyway, I remember loving the music choice of it. So you saw them grooming, kissing each other, and generally being adorable because they are kind of adorable. The prairie dog copulation occurs in the burrows, which reduces risks of another male coming in. And you can mate outside of your family group if it helps increase the chance of survival. So there's some reasons why that would be okay. Let me see, doing a quick time check. So we have just enough time to talk about the other kind of famous thing about prairie dogs, which is their bark. So a prairie dog is well adapted to predators. It has dichromatic vision, and so it can see and can detect predators from a great distance. It'll also alert other prairie dogs of danger using special high-pitched calls. Pull this up. Thank you, Stacy, for the heads up about the volume. So this is a prairie dog call. Very short. If you haven't heard the yip, that's kind of what that is. Yeah, it sounds like a dog barking. I don't know, maybe a French dog. Some scientists assert that prairie dogs use a sophisticated system of vocal communication to describe specific predators. So they could say, what the predator is, how big it is, how fast it's moving, and what direction it's approaching from. This is a quick sidebar, but there was other research that showed that it could just be to cause other prairie dogs to all look up out of their holes so that they get attacked instead of the prairie dog that noticed the predator. I like to think that it's the sophisticated communication, but it could totally be sabotaging the other prairie dogs. Anyway, so if the alarm indicates a hawk diving toward the colony, all the prairie dogs in the flight path dive into their holes, while outside of the flight path will stand and watch because they know the flight path, they communicate it. If the alarm is for a human, all members of the colony immediately rush into their burrows. If the call is for a coyote, then prairie dogs move to the entrance of a burrow and stand watch at the entrance, observing the coyote, while those prairie dogs that were inside the burrows will come out and stand watch as well. So for a hawk, they know to get out of the way of the flight path specifically, otherwise they can watch. For human, go away. Coyotes, everyone needs to get out to watch to see which direction the coyote's going. And then for domestic dogs, it's sort of like the coyotes, but like I said, not everyone agrees. The black-tailed prairie dog in particular does something very interesting, which is called a jump yip. So you might see them do this sort of behavior, which ends up, they kind of just get on their hind leg and throw their arms up in the air like that, their forearms. Other quick prairie dog fun fact. In companies that use a large number of cubicles in a common space, employees sometimes use the term prairie dogging to refer to the action of several people looking up simultaneously at a noise or disturbance across the cubicles. So it's thought to resemble the kind of startled response from a group of prairie dogs. So for when you're back in the office at some point in the future and you and all of your coworkers hear something and everyone pokes their head above the cubicles, you can think of the prairie dog. So there you go. All right, so in summary, prairie dogs are a highly social animal that live in towns. They likely have a broad range of sounds to communicate about threats. They also live in intentionally designed burrows with different rooms for different purposes. So that's why I am installing a rim and a dome crater in my own house. That way, after we finish a tasty bean dinner, you can just open up the hatches and get the breeze flowing. All right. Fractal's saving on this one again. Yeah. Fractals, I pulled the one from Wikipedia. Thanks, Jay Nichols. Okay, let's throw up the next part so we can decide where we want to go next week. We have 3 different ones, all kind of dunes related. It's been a while since we've been someplace that has any kind of sand dunes. There's the Great Sand Dunes National Park, the White Sands National Park, and then Indiana Dunes National Park. Get that one up. Thank you, Fractals. All right, and while people are voting on that, I'll do a little sign off here. So today we talked about bison, we talked about prairie dogs, we talked about Theodore Roosevelt, all visiting the Theodore Roosevelt National Park. Fractals will post up a survey in a little bit for input on the chat, or input on the stream. I do appreciate the input, and I look at it and use it to improve every week, so thank you very much for that. Also, if you want to come hang out in the Discord community, we'll chat about the national parks, post up emojis to use, things like that. Just kind of a fun little community area to be. All right, with that, Fractals, what do we, oh, thank you, Fractals. So there's the survey, is that Google Forms link. Fractals, are you able to see how many votes it is before you post it, or is it not? Jay Nichols, you got to vote in the straw poll. It's easier to count. Oh, White Sands. Well, it won anyway. Cool. All right. We got 1 for Great Sand Dunes, 4 for White Sands, and 1 for Indiana Dunes. That's awesome. I actually just reached out to the White Sand Dunes. There's another flight simmer who made a bunch of content to improve that, so it's perfect. All right, great. Well, I'm excited to explore White Sand Dunes National Park with you next week. So with that, thank you for being my co-pilot today, and until we meet again, stay curious and keep on exploring. And I will see you all next week. We have about 1 minute left here. If you would like to stay, you're welcome to. I will attempt to land this plane. I haven't done that on the stream yet, but this officially concludes the content for today. We'll say now it's just watching me attempt to land this thing. Thank you. Bye, Stacy. All right, so we're gonna break a bunch of rules and just get this plane down. Oops, that's not what I want to see. Crazy Tycho, I can't believe you had so many bison jokes lined up. Did you end up searching those, or did you just like know them offhand? I'm not even close to my airport. Land on I-94. Yeah, really. Actually, we could do that. It's gonna be easier. Also, I thought I was closer to the airport than I am. It's a gift and a bird. Excellent. Excellent. Uh, that doesn't answer the question, but I'm gonna assume that you just knew them offhand. I hadn't thought to look for jokes on the different topics before, and I actually hadn't thought to look for them even for this. So we're gonna land at I-94 because that's more fun anyway. And something about bison and jokes, just as you're searching around, they show up all over the place, and I do not know why. All right, so I'm doing slowing down the plane, and then as I get slow enough, I can bring out my flaps. We're gonna land right behind this car. Okay. Yep, car disappears as I land. There you go. This has got to be right about where I was driving on I-94 and had a car breakdown, and it must be like this exit or right near it. So, little flashbacks there. All right, thanks everyone. Yeah, I guess that counts as a landing. Okay, see y'all next week. Bye.